The desert sun blazed high over the horizon, spilling waves of heat across the rocky land. Dust swirled in the air with every gust of wind, carrying with it the faint scent of dry sage and the whisper of rattlesnakes hidden among the stones. A lone cowboy rode across the barren stretch, his horse steady and strong, its hooves clopping rhythmically on the cracked ground. His name was Daniel, a man who had wandered from one end of the frontier to the other, his eyes sharp and his hand steady on the revolver at his side. He had seen many things in his travels: outlaws, gold diggers, farmers fighting for land, and soldiers marching in dusty columns, but nothing prepared him for the encounter that was waiting for him that day. Daniel slowed his horse as he reached a small clearing between jagged cliffs. His instinct told him something wasn't right. The silence was heavy. Even the usual cries of hawks circling above were missing. He pulled gently on the reins, scanning the shadows cast by the towering rocks. Then he saw her. Kneeling in the dust, her hands raised slightly as if in surrender, was a woman dressed in worn Apache garments. Her dark hair was long and tangled, falling over her shoulders, her face marked by both strength and exhaustion. She looked up at him with fierce eyes that still held a spark of defiance even as her body trembled. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Daniel tightened his grip on the reins. His first thought was caution. The Apache were known for their cunning and bravery, and a lone woman kneeling in open ground could easily be a trap. His eyes darted around, scanning the rocks for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just her, alone, with the harsh wind tugging at her clothes. The woman's voice broke the silence. It was hoarse from thirst, but steady with determination. "Please, don't shoot," she said in accented English, her gaze locked on his revolver. "I have something to tell you. Something you must hear." Daniel hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to be careful, but something in her eyes held him there. She wasn't begging for her life the way others might. She wasn't weak or broken. She was proud, standing tall even on her knees, as if she carried the weight of generations on her shoulders. He felt a strange pull, a curiosity that kept him rooted. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hand near his weapon. The horse snorted and stamped the ground, uneasy with the tension in the air. Daniel's boots crunched against the dry earth as he stepped closer. The woman didn't move, only watched him with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. "You're far from your people," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "Why are you here?" "And why should I listen?" The woman drew in a shaky breath. "Because the land is changing," she replied. "Because the blood of both our people has spilled on this ground, and it will not stop unless someone listens. I carry knowledge, a secret that can save lives, both yours and mine." Daniel studied her carefully. He had heard many stories of betrayal, of traps laid with pretty words. But he also knew the Apache were people of honor, and their warriors, whether men or women, spoke with weight. Still, he couldn't let his guard down. "You're asking me to believe you," he said, "but you give me no reason." Her eyes glistened with something between desperation and pride. "Then take me with you. Let me show you. If I lie, you can end me. But if I speak truth, perhaps your people and mine do not need to keep killing each other." The words struck him. It wasn't just a plea, it was a bargain, a risk she was willing to take. Daniel's mind raced. If he brought her along, he would be marked as a traitor by some of his own kind. If he left her, he might never uncover what she knew. And if he killed her now, the weight of it would follow him forever. The sun dipped slightly lower, casting long shadows across the clearing. Daniel felt the stillness grow heavier, pressing on his chest. He thought of the many times he had seen good men fall in pointless battles, of the villages burned and the families torn apart. Maybe, just maybe, this woman carried something worth listening to. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She lowered her head for a moment, then raised it again with quiet dignity. "Nayeli," she answered. "It means I love you in my tongue. My father gave me this name so I would carry peace even in war." The simple power of the name softened Daniel's heart. He let out a slow breath, weighing his choices. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind moving across the rocks filled the silence. Then, from the corner of his eye, Daniel spotted movement on the cliff above. His hand flew to his revolver as his instincts roared to life. A shadow darted between rocks. It wasn't just Nayeli out here. There were others. "Stay down," Daniel barked, drawing his gun and stepping in front of her without thinking. A figure appeared briefly on the ridge, then vanished. An arrow whistled through the air and struck the ground near his feet. His horse reared and neighed loudly, panicked by the sudden danger. Daniel fired a warning shot at the ridge, the crack of the revolver echoing off the cliffs. Silence followed, thick and tense. Whoever had been there had retreated, at least for now. But the message was clear. This was dangerous ground. He turned back to Nayeli, who had not moved, her expression unreadable. "Was that your doing?" he demanded. Her eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. "No, I swear it. If they wanted you dead, you would not still be standing. Those were scouts testing you, testing me. They wanted to see if you would kill me without thought." Daniel clenched his jaw. It made sense, though he didn't like it. He had stumbled into something larger than himself. Nayeli's secret, whatever it was, wasn't just hers alone. It was tied to her people, to the war that seemed endless on this land. For the first time, Daniel realized he wasn't holding all the power in this meeting. He had a choice, but so did she, and both their choices could change more than just their own fates. He holstered his revolver slowly, his decision made. "All right, Nayeli," he said. "I'll give you a chance. You say you have something to reveal, then you'll tell me. But if you betray me..." He left the words hanging, heavy in the air. Nayeli nodded solemnly. "I will not betray you. What I carry is not a trick. It is a truth you must hear. A truth that could change everything." The sun dipped lower and the first hints of evening cooled the desert air. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle into his bones. He had taken the first step into a path he couldn't turn back from. Whatever lay ahead, it would not be simple. But as he looked into Nayeli's determined eyes, he knew one thing. His life, and perhaps the fate of many others, was about to change. The desert grew cooler as the evening shadows stretched long across the rocky cliffs. Daniel tightened the strap on his horse's saddle and glanced again at Nayeli, who stood quietly nearby. Her dark eyes watched every move he made, calm yet alert, like a hawk that had survived many storms. The uneasy silence between them carried the weight of unspoken questions, and Daniel felt the desert pressing in on all sides. He had given her a chance to reveal the secret she claimed to hold. Yet doubts clung to him. Could he trust her? Was he walking straight into danger? He had seen many men lose their lives because they let their guard down. Still, something about her words and the steady strength in her voice made it impossible to turn away. When the horse finally settled, Daniel gestured for her to walk. "We'll move away from here," he said firmly. "Too many eyes are watching these cliffs." Nayeli nodded, her steps light on the dust, her presence strangely quiet yet commanding. They traveled in silence for a while, the sound of hooves against stone and the distant cry of a coyote breaking the stillness. Daniel kept his revolver holstered, but his hand near it, his senses sharp. As night deepened, they reached a small patch of mesquite trees near a dry stream bed. Daniel decided it would be safer to rest there. He struck a small fire, careful to keep the flames low, the orange glow flickering gently against the dark. The fire crackled softly, chasing away the desert chill. Nayeli sat opposite him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes reflected the flames like polished stones. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel broke the silence. "You said you carry a secret," he said slowly, his voice steady. "Now is the time. What is it you want me to know?" Nayeli drew in a breath, her shoulders rising and falling as if gathering courage. "The war between your people and mine does not have to go on," she began. "There are those among the Apache who do not wish for endless bloodshed. My father was one of them." Her voice wavered slightly but soon grew stronger. "Before he died, he told me of something hidden. Something our enemies, both Apache and settlers, do not know. A place of safety. A place where our people once lived in peace long before the war. He told me that if I could find someone willing to listen, someone brave enough to walk between two worlds, I should share it. I believe you may be that man." Daniel studied her face, searching for signs of deception, but found none. Her words carried weight, not rehearsed, not desperate. They carried conviction. Still, he pressed her. "And why tell me? Why not your own people?" Nayeli lowered her eyes for a moment, and her voice softened. "Because not all Apache want peace. Some live only for revenge. They would destroy what my father entrusted to me, but you have no reason to fight for us, no reason to lie for us. If I can make you see, perhaps others will follow." The firelight flickered across Daniel's face as he leaned back slightly, trying to absorb her words. He had ridden across lands scarred by raids and revenge. He had seen villages burned, men ambushed, families shattered. Could it truly be possible that one hidden truth, one place of peace could change it all? Before he could ask more, a rustling sound reached his ears. His hand went to his revolver instantly. Nayeli stiffened too, her instincts as sharp as his. The sound came from beyond the trees, faint footsteps against dry leaves. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he raised his gun, the fire's glow casting his shadow against the rocks. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice low but commanding. A figure stepped into the firelight slowly, hands raised to show he carried no weapon. He was a boy, no older than 16, his clothing torn and his face smeared with dust. His eyes darted nervously between Daniel and Nayeli. "Nayeli," the boy breathed in Apache, his voice shaking. "I followed you. They know you are gone." Nayeli rose to her feet instantly, her expression changing to one of concern. She spoke quickly to the boy in her native tongue, her words flowing like rushing water. Daniel couldn't understand, but he could read the tension in their voices. Finally, Nayeli turned back to him. "This is my brother Tahu," she explained. "He came to warn me." "The warriors know I left the camp. They believe I have betrayed them." Daniel cursed under his breath. Trouble was closing in faster than he expected. He looked at the boy, who was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling like a hunted animal. "How far behind are they?" Daniel asked. Tahu hesitated, then replied in broken English. "Not far. Maybe hours. Maybe less." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had been in tight spots before, but this was worse than most. If they were found, he would be outnumbered and cut down without mercy. The girl's secret would never be heard, and the boy would pay the price too. He looked at Nayeli, who stood tall despite the fear in her eyes. "You brought me into this," Daniel said firmly. "Now you'll have to trust me if you want to live." Nayeli nodded without hesitation. "I trust you." The words carried a strange weight, heavy and pure. Daniel didn't take them lightly. He doused the fire quickly, plunging them into darkness except for the pale glow of the rising moon. He motioned for them to follow, and together they slipped into the shadows of the desert night. They traveled quickly, the boy stumbling at times but refusing to stop. The silence of the desert was broken only by their hurried steps and the distant call of night creatures. Daniel's mind raced as he tried to think of where to go. They couldn't outrun a war party on open ground. They needed cover, a place where numbers would not matter. Hours passed before they came upon a narrow canyon, its walls rising steep and high, hiding them from the open desert. Daniel decided it was their best chance. They pressed deep into the canyon, where the moonlight barely reached, and rested in the shadows of the stone walls. Nayeli placed a gentle hand on her brother's shoulder, whispering words of comfort. Daniel kept watch at the mouth of the canyon, his revolver ready, his eyes never leaving the dark horizon. He felt the weight of their trust on his shoulders, heavier than any saddle or pack he had ever carried. Finally, Nayeli moved to his side, her voice low so the boy could not hear. "You ask why I tell you this secret, Cowboy? It is because I believe men like you still exist. Men who see more than blood and revenge. My father believed such a man would come. Perhaps he was right." Daniel didn't answer right away. He felt the truth in her words, but he also felt the danger closing in around them like a tightening noose. If her people found them, no secret, no promise of peace would save them. Still, as he looked at her, standing strong even in the face of danger, he realized something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt he was walking towards something bigger than himself, something worth more than gold or victory. The night grew colder, the silence broken only by the occasional crack of shifting rock. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of drums echoed through the desert air. It was a warning, a sign that the war party was closer than they thought. Daniel's grip on his revolver tightened, and his heart beat steady. Whatever secret Nayeli carried, whatever truth she wanted to reveal, it would have to wait. For now, survival was all that mattered. And as the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, Daniel knew the coming day would test them all in ways they could not yet imagine. The first light of dawn painted the canyon walls with streaks of orange and gold. The desert slowly came alive, and the chill of the night gave way to dry heat again. Daniel stood watch at the narrow mouth of the canyon, his revolver in hand, his eyes sharp on the horizon. He hadn't slept, not even for a moment. His instincts wouldn't allow it. Danger hung heavy in the air, like a storm building unseen beyond the cliffs. Behind him, Nayeli and her brother Tahu stirred from their uneasy rest. The boy rubbed his eyes, his small frame still weary from their hurried escape. Nayeli knelt beside him, speaking in soft tones that Daniel could not understand, but the sound of her voice carried calmness, strength, and care. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself to watch them, brother and sister, holding on to each other in a world that seemed to want to tear everything apart. It stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had long since turned to stone. When Tahu finally rose, Daniel turned back to Nayeli. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "They'll track us. A canyon is a good place to hide, but it's also a trap if they close in." Nayeli stood, brushing the dust from her dress. "There is a path," she said quietly. "My father once showed it to me. Few know of it. If we follow it, we can reach a place where no war parties dare to go." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" She held his gaze, her eyes filled with something more than words. "Because it is sacred. Because it holds the truth I spoke of. That is where I must take you." Daniel studied her for a long moment, searching her face for signs of deception, but all he found was determination. He gave a small nod. "Lead the way, then. But if your people are waiting for us at the end of this path, it won't go well." Nayeli's lips tightened into a faint smile, not of amusement, but of resolve. "You will see. It is not a trap. It is a promise." They moved out just as the sun rose higher, their shadows stretching long on the canyon floor. The path was narrow and steep, winding between sharp rocks and dry brush. Daniel led the horse carefully while Tahu followed close behind Nayeli, his small legs struggling to keep up with her steady pace. The journey was grueling. The desert sun beat down, unforgiving and relentless. Sweat trickled down Daniel's brow, and the horse snorted with every climb. Yet Nayeli never slowed. She moved with the sure steps of someone who belonged to the land, her eyes scanning the horizon, her ears alert to every sound. Tahu stumbled often, but each time his sister pulled him gently to his feet, whispering words of encouragement. Hours passed, and the land began to change. The flat desert gave way to jagged cliffs, and the cliffs to rolling hills where grass fought stubbornly to grow. Finally, as the sun dipped lower again, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Daniel stopped in his tracks. Below them lay a hidden land, green and untouched. A narrow river cut through the valley, and tall cottonwood trees lined its banks. Birds darted in the air, and deer grazed quietly near the water. It was a place of life, in stark contrast to the barren desert they had crossed. Daniel let out a low whistle. "I've ridden across half this land and never seen a valley like this. How's it been hidden?" Nayeli's eyes softened as she looked down at the valley. "Because it hides itself. The cliffs guard it, and the desert keeps others away. Only those who know the old paths can find it. My father brought me here when I was a child. He told me it was proof that peace could exist even in a world of war." Daniel was silent for a long moment. The sight of the valley struck something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. But before he could speak, Tahu tugged at Nayeli's sleeve, his voice trembling. "Sister, they are coming." Daniel turned sharply. On the ridge behind them, small figures appeared against the setting sun. Riders, Apache warriors. The distance was great, but the dust their horses kicked up told the story clearly. A war party had found their trail. "Move," Daniel ordered. "We can't fight them head-on." Nayeli didn't argue. She led the way down the ridge, moving fast but careful not to stumble. Daniel kept Tahu close and urged his horse forward, the weight of pursuit pressing hard against his back. The sound of distant shouts and the thundering of hooves grew louder with each passing minute. The descent into the valley was steep and dangerous. Loose stones slid under their boots, threatening to give way. At one point, Tahu slipped, nearly tumbling down the slope, but Daniel grabbed him by the arm and pulled him back to safety. "Stay close to me, boy," he muttered, his heart pounding. Finally, they reached the valley floor where the sound of rushing water filled their ears. Nayeli led them to the riverbank where the water sparkled in the fading light. She pointed to a grove of cottonwoods nearby. "This way. The roots hide a path. Hurry!" They scrambled into the grove just as the first riders appeared at the top of the ridge. Shouts echoed through the valley, carried by the wind. Arrows whistled through the air, striking the ground near their feet. Daniel fired 2 shots in return, not to kill but to slow their pursuers. The loud cracks of his revolver echoed across the valley, startling birds from the trees. Nayeli found the hidden path she spoke of, a narrow tunnel formed by roots and rocks that led beneath the grove. One by one, they squeezed through, the space tight and dark, the smell of damp earth thick in their noses. The sound of hooves thundered above them, so close Daniel could feel the vibration through the ground. When they finally emerged on the other side, they were deeper into the valley, hidden from sight. The riders thundered past, unaware of the secret path. Daniel exhaled slowly, his chest burning with relief. For now, they were safe. Nayeli stood tall, her face illuminated by the last glow of sunset. "This is what I wanted to show you," she said softly. "A place where blood does not need to be spilled. A place my father believed could heal both our people." Daniel looked around at the quiet beauty of the valley, the peace that seemed to breathe from the land itself. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something better than endless war. Tahu leaned against his sister, exhausted, but alive. Daniel holstered his revolver and gave a small nod. "You were right to bring me here. But your people won't let this go so easily. They'll keep coming." Nayeli's eyes shone with both sadness and determination. "Then we will stand not as enemies, but as people who want peace. If one man can see it, perhaps others will too." The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, and the valley glowed under the silver light of the moon. Daniel knew the days ahead would not be easy. The war party would return and more would follow. But as he looked at Nayeli and her brother standing proudly beside him, he felt something stir inside his chest. A spark of belief he thought he had long lost. The desert had given him many battles, but maybe this time it had given him a purpose. The valley lay quiet under the pale light of dawn. A thin mist curled above the river and the air smelled fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. Daniel had not slept much through the night. He kept watch with his revolver resting across his lap, listening for every sound in the darkness. The memory of hooves pounding above them and arrows slicing the air was still too fresh. When the first rays of sunlight reached the cottonwoods, Nayeli stirred awake. Her brother Tahu lay curled beside her, breathing softly, finally at peace after the fear of the chase. Daniel watched the two for a moment. They were survivors, both of them, yet different in how they carried their strength. Nayeli held hers like a flame she refused to let go out, and Tahu's strength came from his stubbornness to keep walking even when his legs wanted to give up. As the morning grew brighter, Daniel walked toward the river and splashed cold water on his face. The shock cleared his thoughts, though it did little to ease the weight on his shoulders. They had found this hidden valley, yes, but it was not the end of their troubles. The Apache war party would not give up so easily, and sooner or later the valley's secret would no longer be safe. Nayeli joined him, kneeling by the water to wash her hands. Her reflection shimmered across the rippling surface. "You see now why I brought you here," she said softly. "It is a place meant for peace, not war. But it cannot stay hidden forever. The war outside grows louder every day." Daniel glanced at her. "And you think showing this place to me will change anything? I'm just one man." She looked up at him, her dark eyes steady. "One man can carry a message. One man can choose not to fight when others demand blood. My father believed in such a man." "I believe he was right." Daniel let out a slow breath. He had been called many things in his life: gunslinger, drifter, outlaw, sometimes even hero. But never had anyone asked him to be a messenger of peace. The thought sat heavy in his chest, yet strangely it felt right. Tahu awoke soon after, rubbing his eyes. His young face looked weary beyond his years. He glanced at Daniel nervously, still unsure of the stranger who now traveled with them. But Nayeli's calm presence seemed to reassure him, and he stayed close to his sister. They spent the morning gathering berries and filling their canteens from the river. Daniel checked his horse carefully, knowing they might need to move quickly again. The valley was beautiful, but beauty could not protect them from blades and bullets. By noon, they set out deeper into the valley. Nayeli wanted to show Daniel more of what her father had left her, the truth she carried. The path wound between tall grasses and clusters of cottonwoods until it reached the base of a rocky hill. There, half hidden by vines and stone, was the mouth of a cave. "This is the place," Nayeli whispered, her voice carrying reverence. They entered the cave, the air inside cool and damp. The light of the outside faded quickly, but Nayeli carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She struck two flints together until sparks caught on dried moss, lighting a torch. The flame revealed carvings etched into the stone walls, figures of men and women, animals, and symbols of the sun and moon. Daniel stepped closer, running his fingers lightly across the carvings. "These are old," he muttered. Older than anything I've seen. Nayeli nodded. They tell the story of our people. Long before the war, long before settlers came, this valley was where different tribes gathered. Not to fight, but to share, to trade, to live in peace. My father said the secret was not only the valley itself, but the reminder carved in these stones, that our people once knew peace and could know it again. Her torchlight flickered across her determined face. If the world could see this, maybe they would remember. Maybe they would believe it is possible. Daniel stood silently, staring at the walls. The idea seemed almost foolish. Wars were not ended by pictures on stone, and yet, the weight of the place, the history pressed into the very rock, felt undeniable. He had ridden into many towns where hatred burned hotter than fire. What if there was something here that could make men stop and think? Before he could answer, Tahu tugged at his sister's arm. "I hear something," the boy whispered nervously. Daniel froze, his hand going to his revolver. The sound came faint at first, then clearer, echoing voices from outside the cave. Warriors. Nayeli's face tightened. "They have followed us," Daniel cursed under his breath. There was no easy escape. The cave had only one entrance. He quickly doused the torch, plunging them into darkness. The sound of footsteps grew louder, stones shifting as men approached the cave mouth. Daniel motioned for Nayeli and Tahu to stay silent and pressed himself against the cave wall, his revolver ready. The first warrior's silhouette appeared at the entrance, blocking the sunlight. More shadows moved behind him. Nayeli whispered in her tongue, a plea Daniel could not understand, but he could hear the pain in it. The warriors stepped cautiously inside, their eyes adjusting to the dark. Daniel fired a single shot into the air, the explosion booming through the cave like thunder. The warriors stumbled back in shock, shouts echoing against the stone. Daniel didn't aim to kill, only to buy time. "Run," he hissed. Nayeli grabbed her brother's hand, pulling him toward a narrow gap at the side of the cave that Daniel hadn't noticed before. It was small, barely wide enough for a child, but it led deeper. With no other choice, they squeezed into the passage. Daniel followed last, the shouts of the warriors ringing louder behind them. The passage was dark and tight, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Rocks scraped against Daniel's back as he pushed forward, his revolver clenched in one hand. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, but the echoes of their shouts still carried. At last, they emerged into another chamber. This one was larger, the ceiling high above, and shafts of sunlight broke through cracks in the rock, casting golden beams across the floor. In the center stood a stone altar, and upon it lay ancient objects, clay pots, arrowheads, and carved figures. Nayeli's eyes filled with awe. "This is the heart of it," she whispered. "The place my father told me of." Daniel scanned the chamber quickly, making sure there was no danger, then turned back to her. "This is what you wanted me to see?" She nodded. "It is proof that our people lived here together, not as enemies. If this valley is lost, so is that memory. That is why I risked everything to bring you here." Tahu clung to his sister, his young eyes wide with wonder and fear. Daniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He understood now. This was more than a secret. It was a legacy, a chance to remind the world of something greater than war. But before he could speak, the sound of voices echoed again, this time closer. The warriors had found the passage. Nayeli looked at Daniel, fear flashing in her eyes. "What do we do?" Daniel checked his revolver. He had only a few bullets left. Fighting would mean certain death. Yet something inside him refused to let this place be destroyed. He holstered the weapon slowly and looked at Nayeli with calm resolve. "We stand," he said quietly. "Not as enemies, but as guardians. If they see we mean no harm, maybe they will listen." It was a gamble, maybe a foolish one, but it was the only path left. The shadows of the warriors stretched long across the chamber floor as they entered, their weapons drawn. The air grew thick with tension, and the silence was sharp as a blade. Daniel stepped forward, raising his empty hands. His voice rang steady in the cavern. "This is not a place for war. Look around you. Look at what your fathers left behind. Do you want to destroy it or remember it?" The warriors froze, their eyes flicking to the ancient carvings, the altar, the sacred relics. For a long moment, no one moved. Nayeli stood beside Daniel, her head high, her voice joining his. "This valley belongs to peace. If you kill here, you kill the memory of our people." The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of dripping water deep within the cave. Then slowly one of the older warriors lowered his weapon. His eyes softened as he looked at the altar. Another followed, then another. The leader remained tense, his eyes locked on Daniel. Finally, with a sharp gesture, he motioned for his men to lower their arms. For the first time, Daniel felt the chance of something greater than survival, perhaps the beginning of understanding. The cave was silent except for the faint sound of dripping water. The warriors stood still, their weapons lowered but not forgotten. Daniel's heart pounded, yet his face remained calm, his hands raised to show he carried no threat. Beside him, Nayeli stood tall, her voice steady though her heart raced. "This is the place my father spoke of," she said, her words firm. "A place for peace. If we spill blood here, we bury the memory of who we were. Is that what you want for your children? For your people?" The leader of the warriors, a tall man with deep lines carved into his weathered face, studied her carefully. His eyes moved to Daniel, then to the stone altar glowing in the golden shafts of light. For a long moment, the chamber seemed frozen in time. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but commanding. "You left our camp, Nayeli. You broke trust. Why bring a stranger here? Why risk everything?" Nayeli's eyes shone with quiet strength. "Because I believe he must see it. Because the world outside is changing, and soon this valley will not stay hidden. If only we guard it in secret, it will be lost. But if we share its truth, perhaps it can live." The leader's gaze darkened. "And this cowboy? Why him?" Daniel lowered his hand slowly but kept his voice steady. "I didn't ask to come here, but now that I've seen it, I know it's worth protecting. Not with bullets, not with war, with memory, with truth." The chamber grew tense again. The warriors exchanged glances, their expressions torn between loyalty to their leader and the pull of the sacred place around them. The boy Tahu clung to his sister's hand, his young eyes wide with both fear and hope. The leader finally let out a long breath, his stern face softening just slightly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps some things should not be lost." He motioned to his men, and they lowered their weapons fully. The danger eased, though the weight of mistrust still lingered. For the rest of the day, the warriors and their leader listened as Nayeli shared her father's words and showed them the carvings on the walls. Daniel stood nearby, silent but watchful, knowing the wrong gesture could shatter the fragile calm. But as the hours passed, he saw the men's eyes soften, their anger dulled by the undeniable truth carved into stone. By evening, the leader gave his decision. "We will not destroy this place. We will guard it. But the outside world must not find it yet. Not until both our peoples are ready." Nayeli bowed her head in respect. "That is all I ask." When the warriors left the cave, the tension eased at last. Daniel, Nayeli, and Tahu remained inside, sitting by the altar as night crept in. The torchlight flickered softly, casting shadows on the ancient walls. Daniel finally spoke. "You risked everything to bring me here, and now I understand why. But what happens next? You can't go back to your people as if nothing happened. And I can't ride into town telling this story without men calling me mad." Nayeli looked at him with calm certainty. "Then we walk a different path. Not yours, not mine. Something new. My father believed the world would one day change. Perhaps that day is closer than we think." Tahu leaned against his sister, exhaustion pulling at his small frame. "I only want the fighting to stop," he whispered. Daniel placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "So do I, son. More than you know." They left the cave the next morning, the valley glowing with the fresh light of dawn. The river sparkled as if it carried secrets of its own, and the cottonwoods swayed gently in the breeze. For a moment it felt as though the land itself was alive, breathing with relief that blood had not been spilled. As they walked, Daniel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For years he had been a wanderer, chasing coin and survival, never believing in much more than the speed of his revolver. But now, for the first time, he felt part of something larger than himself, something worth protecting even if the world did not yet understand. Days turned into nights as they traveled through the valley, finding paths hidden by nature's hand. Daniel taught Tahu how to ride the horse, his laughter echoing through the valley as the boy gained confidence. Nayeli often walked ahead, guiding them with quiet strength, her eyes always scanning, her thoughts always deep. They were not without danger. Once they spotted riders in the distance, men not from the Apache but settlers moving westward. Daniel knew the day would come when others would stumble upon this valley. That truth gnawed at him, for the memory of peace carved in the cave could easily be lost to greed and war. One night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Daniel sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Nayli joined him, her face lit softly by the glow. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the chorus of night creatures. "You could leave," Nayeli said quietly. "You could ride away and never look back. No one would know." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, I've ridden away from too many things in my life. This time I stay. This time I choose to stand." Her eyes glistened, and though she said nothing more, the fire between them carried the weight of unspoken understanding. When morning came, they stood together at the edge of the valley. Beyond the cliffs lay the endless desert, the world of war and mistrust waiting. Behind them lay the hidden sanctuary, a fragile hope. Daniel turned to Nayeli and Tahu. "This valley won't stay secret forever, but until then we guard it. We protect it. Not just for us, for everyone who might one day need to see it." Nayeli nodded, her face calm yet filled with determination. "Then we guard it together." The boy smiled faintly, his small hand gripping Daniel's tightly, as if he had found a protector he never expected. And so they remained in the valley, three unlikely companions bound not by blood but by choice. Each day they lived as guardians. Each night they prayed the world outside would one day be ready for the truth carved in stone. The cowboy who once wandered without purpose had found one. The Apache warrior who risked everything for peace had planted a seed of hope. And the young boy who feared losing his sister now found strength in both of them. The valley, hidden and sacred, carried their footsteps and their promises, holding them like whispers on the wind. Perhaps the world was not ready for peace yet. But one day, when the time came, the memory of what had been carved in stone would be there, waiting, and in that hidden place, far from the endless wars, a cowboy, a warrior, and a boy began a story that would outlive them all.